On August 13, 1980, on a remote road in Snohomish County, flashing police lights signaled an ordinary traffic stop that unexpectedly uncovered a series of chilling crimes. Stop! With the police's command, a car that was slightly speeding slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. Inside, 20-year-old David Roth, with a pale face and trembling hands, handed over his identification. The policeman's intuition told him that this was not just about speeding. Upon searching, marijuana, an .22 caliber rifle in the car foreshadowed deeper evil. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The next day, while a couple was picking blueberries, they unexpectedly discovered the body of a woman. The gunshot wound on her head was strikingly consistent with the caliber of the rifle found in David's car. Was it a coincidence or a meticulously planned murder? The ugliness of human nature is always exposed in criminal cases. Let's explore and study the human nature revealed in these cases together. On August 13, 1980, the police in Snohomish County, Washington, intercepted a car with a slight speeding violation on a road near a small village. Upon checking the identification, they found out that the driver of the car was a 20-year-old named David Roth. The police noticed his nervous demeanor and decided to search the car, where they found marijuana and a .22 caliber rifle in the trunk. David was arrested, but since the crimes he committed were not serious, he was released after posting bail. On August 14th, in the same village, the police received a report from a couple who were preparing to pick blueberries. A female corpse was found in a local forest. The forensic examination revealed that the deceased had a penetrating wound on her head caused by a .22 caliber rifle, and there were obvious ligature marks on her neck. The gunshot wound on her head had destroyed her facial features, and no other identification was found on her body. This unidentified corpse case was quite troublesome for the local police. Just when they were prepared for a long battle, the clue to solving the case came to them. The day after the body was found, a young man walked into the police station, claiming that his friend David Roth had confessed to him after drinking that he had killed a hitchhiker. The police quickly launched a pursuit of David. Although he escaped a step earlier, his car and gun were found. Ballistic tests proved that this was the murder weapon, and the police also found an elastic rope stained with blood in the car. In January 1979, David Roth was finally arrested. According to his admission, at that time, he used the pretext of going to the forest to drink beer and chat, wanting to have sex with the girl, and after being rejected, he brutally killed her in anger. In February 1980, David was sentenced to life imprisonment under the watchful eyes of his brother Randy Roth. From the process of David's crime to his sentencing, Randy repeatedly talked about it to the female friends around him, each time cursing David as a murderer and then taking the opportunity to complain about his entire family. Randy and David are both children of Gordon Roth and Lisa Roth. Although their parents are religious, the consistency of faith cannot bridge the unhappiness of marriage, and no one in this family is happy. In 1971, the two officially divorced, and the 5 children followed one of the two sides according to their own wishes, so this family was split into 2 camps that disliked each other. David lived with his mother. In his description, the father was an abuser, and the mother was always the one who took care of them, but Randy, who lived with his father, did not think so, and instead looked down on his mother. Whenever friends asked about her, Randy would answer dead or crazy. In fact, their father was indeed an abuser and a control freak, as David said. In his eyes, emotions such as fear, sympathy, kindness, and sadness that everyone has are feminine and should not appear on his sons, so as long as they show some so-called feminine emotions, they will be severely punished. Under such education, Randy has been a bully in school since he was a child, often bullying in school. He hates women and everything he thinks is feminine, and only women who are obedient to him can get Randy's approval. This tendency also exists among his male friends. Randy is only willing to play with people who flatter himself. After graduating from high school, Randy was fascinated by war movies and chose to join the military, enlisting in the United States Marine Corps. However, he did not get the chance to be deployed to the front line, but was instead assigned to a small island in the Pacific as a file clerk. The monotonous life on the island quickly bored Randy, so when his mother wrote to the service department to complain, wanting her son to return home to support her, Randy took the opportunity to retire from the military. Due to his poor relationship with his mother, Randy still returned to live with his father after retiring from the military. Soon after, he became engaged to a girl named Terry, and they moved into a property owned by Terry's family. However, the engagement was broken off shortly after, as Terry found another woman's wallet in her home. A few months later, Terry's parents' home was robbed at gunpoint, and she went to the police to accuse Randy, not only of being the perpetrator of the robbery, but also of robbing a store before joining the military. After an investigation, it was found that Randy did indeed commit both crimes, but he did not receive any severe punishment and was only imprisoned for 2 weeks. After being released, he became engaged to the woman he had an affair with, Donna. This chaotic marriage was very short-lived. In 1978, the couple had a son, and in 1980, after David was sentenced, Randy filed for divorce from Donna without giving any reason, only requesting to keep their son. Donna made a fuss, but she eventually agreed to the divorce, not knowing at the time that her decision actually saved her life. In early 1981, Randy, who was raising his child alone, met a divorced single mother, Janice, through a parent-child activity. Randy started with topics related to children and quickly won Janice's favor. This mother, who had experienced single parenthood since childhood, regarded her daughter as her everything. Randy took advantage of this and showed his love for his son, which quickly made Janice think he was a responsible and good man. In March of that year, the two walked into the marriage hall. After getting married, Janice found out that Randy was not as she had imagined. Since their honeymoon, Randy's attitude towards her had cooled rapidly, and in the end, it seemed as if he had never fallen in love with her at all. At the same time, strange things began to happen in this family. Janice owned a Ford car, and after getting married, Randy began to urge her to take out more insurance for the car. After a long period of nagging, Janice, who was fed up, reluctantly entrusted Randy to handle it. Strangely, as soon as the insurance purchased by Randy took effect, Janice's car was immediately stolen. While the couple reported to the police and asked the nearby neighbors to help look for it, the police and everyone else searched and finally found the involved vehicle in a wilderness outside the city. After inspection, the other parts of the car were intact, but the engine was missing. What puzzled the police was why the thief went to such lengths, since they had already stolen the car, but only left the engine. Moreover, the thief was very professional and did not leave any traces, so the police could only put this case on hold and investigate slowly. Although this case was controversial, the theft was a fact recognized by the police, and the insurance company had to fulfill the contract and pay a large sum of insurance money to Randy and his wife. With this as a reference, Janice was no longer so resistant to buying insurance, so, under Randy's coaxing, Janice not only quit her job, but also bought a life insurance policy of $100,000 in September 1981, which took effect in November of that year. 3 weeks after the insurance took effect, Randy, who had never taken his wife out for a trip since their honeymoon, suddenly proposed to go hiking with Janice at the famous Lighthouse Rock Geological Park in the United States. The park is known for its steep terrain and high climbing difficulty, with the most famous attraction being the Lighthouse Rock standing in the middle of the park. Janice, who had long wanted to see the scenery here, immediately agreed, and the two set off the next day. Perhaps the long-lost trip changed her mood, and Janice chatted and laughed all the way, showing a rare appearance of a loving couple in life, which left a deep impression on many people who climbed up with them that day. So much so that when they noticed only Randy returning to the foot of the mountain a few hours later, they all gathered around to ask if he needed help. Faced with everyone's concern, Randy responded indifferently, "Please help me call the police. My wife just fell off the mountain." The local police rushed to the scene and launched a rescue operation. It is worth mentioning that the place where Janice fell was a secluded area near the top of the mountain, more than 300 feet high. Due to the poor viewing angle and some trees blocking the view, no one was willing to go there. The police searched the mountain for several hours, and just as they were about to give up, they found Janice's body. After Janice's death, Randy naturally became a suspect. According to his description, he was the only witness at the scene when Janice fell to her death, and the park had built a fence almost half a person high at that location. It was almost impossible to fall from here without the visitor being reckless. Although Randy's suspicion of the crime was quite high, the police did not find any other injuries besides the fall after the autopsy, nor did they find evidence to prove that Randy killed her. The matter had to be left unresolved, and Janice was finally determined to have died accidentally. On the same day the police announced the end of the investigation into Randy, he cremated his wife's body and filed a claim with the insurance company the next day, eventually receiving about $110,000 in insurance money. Just after insuring the car was stolen, and just after buying life insurance for his wife died accidentally. All of this seems a bit too coincidental. With the insurance money from Janice, Randy's life became more comfortable, and he was also looking for his next target. During this period, he moved with his son and quickly became friends with the new neighbors. The neighbor couple had a 16-year-old daughter, and Randy was infatuated with her, secretly launching an offensive, even coaxing the little girl that he would propose when she turned 18. In order to maintain his image, he made up a lot of his own experiences in the Vietnam War. Interestingly, the neighbor's husband happened to be a veteran who had participated in the Vietnam War and easily saw through Randy's lies. Then he secretly seduced the other party's daughter and was discovered, and Randy had to stop his actions and continue to move. In 1985, he set his sights on another divorced single mother and quickly persuaded her to marry him. Just like his marriage to Janice, Randy showed his true nature after the honeymoon and began to constantly ask his wife to buy insurance. Fortunately, this wife was very determined and never agreed to Randy's request. A few months after they got married, Randy suddenly organized a family trip, this time to go rafting. During the rafting process, Randy kept controlling the inflatable boat to go to places with rapid water and full of sharp rocks, and his wife was scared to scream. After this trip, she filed for divorce. Then Randy took another single mother, but after learning that the other party had undergone cancer treatment and could not be insured, he canceled the engagement. In this way, he went around until 1990, and Randy was still looking for targets that met his requirements. Once, while watching his son's baseball team's game, Randy unexpectedly met his last wife, Cynthia. Like all the above, Cynthia was also a single mother, raising 2 children alone. The reason why she was like this was not due to an unfortunate marriage, but her husband suddenly died of lymphoma. After her husband's death, Cynthia received various inheritances and support from friends and relatives, so she basically had no difficulties in life. So she spent more time accompanying her sons, and in order to support the children's baseball career, she also specially opened a snack bar at the team's home field. At first, Cynthia refused to marry Randy because of her religious beliefs, but no one could resist soft grinding. In August of that year, the 2 people who seemed to have no possibilities suddenly went to Las Vegas to register for marriage. This shocked Cynthia's friends and relatives, but the rice was already cooked, and everyone couldn't say anything more. They could only send blessings one after another. After getting married, Randy sold the original house and bought a larger one, moving in with the new family, looking like a good life was about to start. In fact, when the door of the house was closed, he would show his true nature, not only successfully Pua Cynthia, but also perfectly inheriting his father's methods, and mentally and physically abusing the 3 boys at home. Of course, he did not forget to persuade Cynthia to buy insurance. On July 23, 1991, just a few weeks before their first wedding anniversary, Randy suddenly suggested to Cynthia that the whole family should take a family trip. Thinking that such an activity could ease the tension in the family, Cynthia agreed, and the group set off to visit the famous summer resort of Lake Snohomish in Washington State. It was a sweltering summer day, and by the time Randy's family arrived at their destination, the temperature had soared to 35 degrees Celsius, drawing a particularly large crowd to the lake for relief from the heat and to enjoy swimming. After parking the car, Randy instructed the children to swim in the shallow area, while he invited Cynthia to take an inflatable kayak out onto the lake for a tour. The 2 paddled towards the center of the lake and eventually disappeared from the sight of the people on the beach. A few hours later, Randy and the kayak reappeared on the shore, causing a commotion. Cynthia lay motionless on it, pale-faced and not breathing. Lifeguards on the scene rushed over to administer first aid to Cynthia, and the park management immediately contacted the police and an ambulance. Sadly, all attempts to save Cynthia were in vain, and she was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. Why would a person who was fine and laughing when they set out become a cold corpse just a few hours later? The police suspected foul play and launched an investigation into Randy. According to Randy's account, Everything was fine when they reached the deep water area until several speedboats passed by them, causing their wake to capsize the kayak. After falling into the water, Cynthia was trapped under the boat and cramped while struggling, and Randy had a hard time flipping the boat over to rescue his wife. He claimed to have only performed a symbolic rescue breath since he had no first aid knowledge and did not take any further measures, but instead hastily paddled back to the shore to ask for help. Unfortunately, it was too late. However, the accounts of others present that day were vastly different from Randy's story. The circumstances of Cynthia's death could not be verified as only the two of them were present, but many people saw them return to the shore. Randy was not as anxious as he claimed to be, but instead he was quite leisurely and did not call for help. It was the nearby tourists who noticed something was wrong with Cynthia and called the lifeguards. While the medical staff were trying to resuscitate Cynthia, Randy was tidying up the kayak on the side and didn't even come to check on Cynthia's condition. The medical staff were amazed at the time. These two were actually husband and wife, which was simply inconceivable. But like the Janice incident, although Randy's story was full of contradictions, the police could not immediately grasp substantial evidence of murder and could only monitor him secretly first. In fact, Randy's actions had started even before the police questioned him. The day after Cynthia's death, without notifying any of her relatives or friends, he began to claim more than $400,000 in insurance compensation from the insurance company. In addition, he also planned to adopt Cynthia's two sons and apply for various compensation payments for them. Just before he could get his hands on it, a woman walked into the local police station to report a case. Her name was Lori Beck, a close friend of Cynthia and her former husband. After Cynthia's husband died, she provided long-term spiritual and financial assistance to her. Lori told the police that when she went to clean out Cynthia's safe according to her arrangements, she found that the jewelry and will were missing. According to her recollection, only she and Randy knew about the safe, and Randy was the last person to access the safe before her, so she suspected that Randy had deliberately stolen the items. The police found the attachment to the will at the local notary office, in which Cynthia designated Lori as the guardian of her sons and the inheritor of part of her estate after her death. With this legally binding will, the police knocked on Randy's door. Upon learning that Lori disagreed with the adoption and was going to take the two children away, Randy was extremely frantic. While people were moving in and out, he kept roaring and cursing at Lori, saying that she had ruined his life. If he had successfully received the insurance money and the children's subsidies, he would not have to work for the rest of his life. It was this rage that inspired the police. Randy might have killed his wife for economic reasons. The police then began to investigate in this direction and indeed found clues. Remember the car that Janice lost? Since then, Randy has started to defraud the insurance company, and after he insured some items, they would be stolen quickly. He has played this trick in all companies where he has worked and even fabricated a theft case at his home. This is why Randy, who is often an unemployed mechanic, still has many sports cars and properties under his name. After determining the direction of the investigation, the police began to collect evidence, not only bringing in the two ex-wives who were divorced because they could not be insured, but also learning from Randy's current colleagues that Randy often claimed that his relationship with Cynthia was not a marriage, but a contract for 1 year. More importantly, they also found the Janice's fall case that happened 10 years ago. With only Randy as the only witness, his story was also full of contradictions. Both the deceased had accidents after being insured, and the beneficiary of the insurance was Randy. Now it can almost be determined that Janice's death was not an accident. With these inferences and evidence, the police successfully persuaded the court to issue an arrest warrant and search warrant and immediately arrested Randy. When the police knocked on his own door and put handcuffs on him, Randy was still in a state of disbelief. After the police searched Randy's current residence, they found two crucial pieces of evidence. One, a diving suit and diving certificate, which proves that Randy has enough ability to rescue his wife at the first time. Two, some of Cynthia's diaries that had not been destroyed in time. One of them listed 44 things that Randy hated about Cynthia, from her ugly toes to her dolls in every room, her drinking coffee to her liking to volunteer to help others. And he also hated Randy's money, house, and her independent nature. The most important thing is that these things were put together with the press release of Randy's second wife's cliff fall and the cremation receipt and other items. On October 9, 1991, although the evidence was not very sufficient, the police still arrested Randy for murder. The wealthy Randy immediately hired a luxurious defense team for himself, who tried their best to deal with those witnesses and evidence in advance before the court. Fortunately, they did not succeed, and the trial of Randy finally officially started in March 1992. In the court, the prosecution and defense had a fierce confrontation. The defense depicted him as a person who was persecuted because of misfortune and lost two wives in a tragic accident. The prosecution depicted him as an indifferent and greedy person who cares more about cars and money than his wife and children. But even if the defense blew Randy to the sky, it could not stop more than 100 witnesses from testifying for the prosecution. One of the diving instructors testified that he had trained Randy as a skilled diver. Janice's daughter also said that a week before her mother's death, she showed her an envelope with money and told her that if she had an accident, she could take the money. A week after Janice's death, when the daughter was taking the money, she was discovered by Randy, who took the money on the pretext of keeping it for her and then disappeared. Almost all of his colleagues and neighbors around him can prove that he has implemented fraud insurance more than once and committed theft several times. Even in the face of such overwhelming evidence, Randy still insists that he is innocent and everything that happened before is an accident. The indifferent expression on his face when he said these words made a deep impression on the jury, and some people even said later, he is like a machine without any emotions. After the trial ended, the jury spent 8 hours discussing and finally ruled that Randy was guilty of murder and theft, and sentenced him to 55 years in prison for multiple crimes. In 1994, Randy once appealed, but was quickly rejected, and now he and his brother David are in the same prison. David Roth stayed in prison for 26 years before being released in 2005. He died of cancer on August 9, 2015, almost 38 years after the day he killed the hitchhiking girl. Randy Roth is still serving his sentence in prison, now 68 years old, imprisoned in the Stafford Creek Correction Center in Washington State. Despite Randy Roth's attempt to appeal his first-degree murder conviction, he was unsuccessful. According to Enrule's book, although he was sentenced to 50 years in prison, he may be released after serving 34 years due to good behavior. This channel posts a variety of cases every day. If you're interested, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like the content. It's the best support you can offer.